Hey everyone, I'm Marley of the blog Namely Marley. Thanks for joining me today for the 50th episode of the Chopped Podcast. This is the podcast designed for people just like you, bloggers who love food. So what do we do here? Well, every week my goal is to share with you interviews, thoughts, stories, everything related to food blogging so that we can all learn together about what works with food blogging and maybe even a little bit about what doesn't. Wow. Well, here we are, episode 50. I don't know why this feels like such a milestone to me, but it does. I guess because I've interviewed over 50 people because we have some in the queue already for you guys, but they're experts in their fields and they've delivered their ideas on entrepreneurship, creativity, technology, SEO, photography, and more. All of this stuff that, we've interviewed people about and delivered them to your ears. I'm so inspired by the opportunity to do this for you. Some people have asked why I started the Chopped Podcast, and I think that's such a great question. Here's what I feel. I started the podcast initially as an extension of the conference because we all felt such a great energy there. It was an energy of learning and sharing and networking, and there's a lot of equality there as well, that we all were there kind of helping each other and rooting for each other to be successful. And I wanted to continue that feeling throughout the year. I just didn't want to experience that once a year, and so I felt like the Chopped Podcast was a way of doing that. And now I'm really thrilled to learn that the Chopped brand has developed into an identity of its own. It's all about helping creative entrepreneurs with a passion for food, people like you, to learn their craft and to find a place of confidence in that. Because here's what I know. Being a creative entrepreneur is hard work. Our friends and family may not always get that, right? They hear food blogger and they kind of get that blank look on their face and they're like, you do what? But here's what I've learned after 50 episodes of this podcast. Being a creative entrepreneur is even harder work if you're not aligned with your true calling. I know this because I've operated from that position before. I've felt tossed this way and that, trying to understand the craft of food blogging. Should I do roundups? Should I do tall pins? This person is posting 5 days a week. Should I do that? Should I write long posts, short posts, whatever? There's lots of questions we could be throwing out there. To be honest, when I started this podcast, I thought there were a lot of secrets out there about blogging. Or actually, maybe just a few. Actually, I felt like there were a few secrets out there, and I hoped to uncover them so that we could all better understand how this highly complicated thing called blogging works. I guess I had that belief because I have an MBA, and so when I went to grad school, there was a curriculum, and after completing the coursework, I had the diploma, and there's an expectation of people who come with certain degrees, right? MBAs, we take economics, accounting, management, negotiations, product development, lots of other classes. But I think sometimes I can envision like a sort of MBA for creative bloggers. The foundational coursework could include SEO for sure, right? Marketing, food photography and video, branding, social media, small business management, for sure, technology, networking, negotiations, and maybe team building. Did I get it all? What would you add to that foundational coursework for creative bloggers? Well, whatever these courses would be, the idea would be that if you could master these areas, then you would have a fighting chance at being successful as a creative blogger. I think there's some truth to this concept. It's good to immerse yourself in these foundational topics as a blogger, be, fluent in being able to discuss them and know what they mean. But beyond these foundational courses, my big takeaways based on the first 50 episodes of this podcast is, beyond the foundational stuff, it's simply a bunch of electives. Because what I've learned is there's no one path to success. There's actually a whole lot of pathways towards, let me just air quote this, success. Even how bloggers define success can be so different. For example, if your definition of success is based on page views, then I've talked to people who only post maybe 1 or 2 times a week, but they rely heavily on SEO and keyword planning to achieve over 300,000 page views per month. Others I've talked to that have that same goal of getting high page views, they've done that by consistently posting 5 to 6 times a week for a long period of time. Maybe your idea of success is doing more sponsored posts. And if so, then, one thing that we learned this year is that brands love great photos. They're also looking for engagement and engaged audience with your readers. Maybe they're looking for video work, and that's something that you want to add to what you're already doing. For sure, we know that if your goal is to be working with brands, you want to have a sense of professionalism about the work that you do, and you'll want strong negotiation skills and also just confidence in yourself and in what you bring to the table. Maybe your idea of success is creating your own products. If so, you may not even need high page views to make that happen. You just need a committed audience that's very focused in on the topic that you're creating products around. And you probably need a strong email list. And of course, you got to have great products too. But that you can see here, right? Like every version of success has its own formula. And I think that's the part where you come in and you get to create that. There are so many amazing stories amongst the bloggers I've interviewed, and there may be some inside of you as well, some untapped passion wanting to come alive. And if you haven't tapped into that passion, then you may actually be, scratching your head and wondering why you started your blog in the first place, because now it's starting to feel just like a chore and you want to quit. Maybe you even feel like a failure, because I've been there before. I've been back and forth sometimes over the years with contract work that I do on the side. And sometimes those consulting projects take on a lot of my time, and therefore I've had less time for the blog. And so my blogging has kind of gone back and forth as a result. And sometimes that happens when you have something that you're doing from a place of passion, and you got to refill the well, and then your passion reignites, and then you're right back into it. This is how blogging works sometimes. And if that's how it's working for you, that's okay. There can be that back and forth dance like that. That's especially the case if what you have is a hobby blog. But if you're yearning for something more, you want to take your blog to a professional level, then I want to tell you the secret that I've learned. After 50 episodes of the podcast, including interviews with some very successful bloggers from around the world, there is a secret sauce. It's called passion. Not just any passion, it's your passion. To be truly successful, we have to go inside ourselves to truly know what our passion is. Jay Pryor is my life coach, and you heard him speak in episode 48. And he says everything you need is inside you. You just have to do the work to understand what that is. I think there's a lot of ways that you can work to better understand yourself and your passions. So, for example, you can hire a life coach like Jay, or maybe you prefer working with a therapist. I've met with therapists at different periods of my life, and they can be very helpful. There are other approaches that you can consider for sure. There are two that I want to specifically talk about today. The first one is meditation. I know people talk about meditation as a way to relax and avoid stress, and some people even refer to meditation as a great productivity tool. That's all great. But what I've been using meditation for lately is a way to peel back the layers and truly understand myself, to know who I am and what my true passions are. Because I think sometimes our passions can kind of get buried under all these socialized layers of ourselves. So if you're unfamiliar with meditation, I'm going to leave some links to a few of my favorite resources in the show notes page. I have several that I work with, because sometimes I'm looking for more of like a clinical kind of meditation that's just focusing on my breathing. And sometimes I'm looking for more of a spiritual meditation that really helps me, untaps the passion that's inside of me. So there are all different kinds of ways to meditate, and I found some that really work well for me. So another tool that I use for really understanding myself is my daily journaling. Most every morning, I write 2 to 3 handwritten pages in a notebook. I buy a cheap notebook at the dollar store, but I do like to write with a nice pen. So I have a nice pen or two that I love to write with, and I just will sit down in the morning and have my cup of tea, and we'll begin writing. Now, that sounds really peaceful, right? Because I just want to clarify, I think you have to turn off that internal censor, and you can't judge about what you're writing. So sometimes I may just sit there and gripe for 3 pages. And other times I may have some really great things going on that I'm writing about. And I'm very inspired about some new idea I'm working on. I get creative sometimes and brainstorm around a certain topic. And like I say, other times I might just sit there and whine about something that I'm frustrated about. It doesn't matter. It's good not to censor it too much, because what I found is that by journaling consistently over the years, I have become my own friend. I know myself so much better. And sometimes when I have a problem, I can go to my notebook and kind of sort things out there as a way of kind of understanding myself. My next step is probably going to be to go talk to Sean, because he's my rock, and I go to him for about everything. So, but if I don't understand what it is that's really bothered me in the first place, then any other step I take after that is not going to be helpful. So that's why I find journaling to be such an important thing. I learned this technique for morning pages in Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way. I'll leave a link in the show notes page. She explains an entire process for tapping into your creativity, because I think we all have, at least at some point in time in our life, held this notion that creativity is something that, has to fall upon us or whatever. Anyway, I'm sure that there are cases that that it works that way too, but there are ways to tap into that and to actually refill the well so that the creativity is there for you. So whatever your process is, whether it's hiring a life coach or following a book with a prescriptive creative process, I think looking at the launch and continued outreach of your blog as your desire for creative expression is so important. So you started that blog for a reason, and maybe initially you thought it was about making money, who knows? But in my mind, I feel like the desire to create that blog is your desire for creation. So whether it's spending time in the kitchen or learning more about photography or having the opportunity to write freely, this is your baby. It's your blog. And like I say, I do feel like this is a way for you to tap into and unleash your passion. And I really think that is the key to focus on too. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like it's easy to suffer from this condition that's overdeveloped knowledge and underdeveloped wisdom. So let me explain. I'm listening to Sam Harris's book called Awakenings. It's on spirituality. And he calls wisdom this: it's knowing the right thing to do and then doing it. So his point is that if a friend were to come up to you and ask a question like, how do I lose weight? Or how can I live a better life? Or I'm really struggling with procrastination. Or I don't know, I want to do the dishes better. Nobody says that, but whatever. We oftentimes have an answer to give to that friend, right? Like we know what to tell them. That means we know what to do. We have the wisdom inside us. The question is, are we doing it ourselves? That's what wisdom is. Knowing the right thing to do and then doing it. Sometimes I think it feels so easy in today's overdeveloped knowledge world to swim in that sea of, quote, they know what they're doing, so I should just spend time watching them. Or if they have a book, then I'll buy their audiobook or watch their webinar or whatever, and then I'll have the answers to what I need. Of course, if they're explaining something that's foundational and you really want to improve in that area, I mean, there's some value in that. If it's SEO or there's some photography course, take the course. That's great. Watch their webinar, listen to their podcast. I love listening to podcasts like Pat Flynn's Smart Passive Income. He shares interviews with so many people who have so many different approaches to being an online entrepreneur. I find it fascinating. I think that's probably the business side of me that, is intrigued by all that. But for the passion part of the equation, that's the stuff that's inside of us, and only we can do that work. So gain the knowledge you need for the foundational stuff. Spend the time in meditation and journaling to know yourself creatively, and then apply the wisdom and do it. So that's the end of today's podcast. I have truly enjoyed taking this journey with you. And we have some amazing interviews coming right around the corner. I can't wait to share them with you. And I'm going to continue this podcast as long as it's a service to you and the important work that you're doing every day. So thank you again for joining me. You inspire me so much, and I hope that this podcast has inspired you as well. Thanks, and have a great week.